This is the Lex Beyond podcast by Lexicon Labs. I'm Lex.
And I'm Bianca. Welcome to the Deep Dive. If you work anywhere near finance or regulatory policy, or maybe you just follow the wild world of crypto and sports betting, it feels like chaos right now.
Total chaos. But what if it wasn't random?
Exactly. What if all that chaos, all that confusion could be boiled down to just four deceptively simple words?
And that is the core idea, the whole thesis of the research we're diving into today from Lexicon Labs. They argue that almost every major fight, every big disagreement at this multi-trillion-dollar intersection of law and finance, it all stems from one thing.
A failure to define four basic terms.
A critical, and I'd say unresolved, failure to define. Investing, speculation, gambling, and gaming.
Right. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to stop treating this like some, academic game and really expose the concrete financial fallout of this definitional vacuum.
People hear jargon, law, and finance stuff, and their eyes just glaze over.
They tune out. They think it's just lawyers splitting hairs.
We need to just, get rid of that idea right now. This is not philosophy, not at all. This is a trillion-dollar reality.
Okay, so how do we prove that?
What's so fascinating here is just the sheer amount of money, the financial muscle, that is tied up in the ambiguity itself. The lack of clarity is, in fact, the market opportunity.
And this is where the scale just becomes, it's staggering. We're talking about massive publicly traded companies whose entire business model depends on navigating these gray areas.
Absolutely. Lexicon Labs points to valuations like Robinhood, which has been valued around $115 billion. Then you have Coinbase sitting somewhere near $71 billion.
And that's just one side of it, the sort of investment-adjacent world.
Right. Then you look at the betting and gaming giants. FanDuel is at $31 billion. DraftKings, $16 billion. And then you've got these emerging platforms.
The so-called prediction markets.
Things like Polymarket, Kalshi, Crypto.com, all of them valued in the tens of billions.
And if you zoom out even further, the global crypto market cap alone is, over $3 trillion? The fact that these giants even exist and that they're generating these staggering amounts of money based on, completely contested definitions of what a security is or a wager or a commodity,
right,
that tells you everything.
It does. The price tag for being fuzzy with your words is counted in, metric tons of capital.
The problem isn't that these activities exist, right? People have always gambled and speculated.
Of course. The problem is when they're allowed to sort of masquerade under definitions that give them benefits they shouldn't have. Regulatory advantages or, consumer protections that they just haven't earned.
Okay, so let's unpack that. If the market is actually structured around this confusion, what are the immediate tangible costs to the public, to the economy?
I think we have to start with the most direct cost, the transfer of wealth.
From who to who?
From those who can least afford to lose it. This brings us to outcome number one, which Lexicon Labs calls a huge welfare transfer implication.
That sounds clinical. What does welfare transfer actually mean for a regular person?
It means this isn't just about someone making a bad trade. It's about trillions of dollars moving systematically from the general uninformed public over to the sophisticated informed players.
Or even worse.
Or, more cynically, to those who are just really good at exploiting the fact that there are no clear rules.
Okay, but how does the lack of clarity, just not having a definition, how does that specifically let this transfer happen?
Okay, imagine a product. It's marketed with all the language of investing, long-term gains, diversification, your future value.
Yeah.
But if you look at its structure under clear rules, it's actually pure speculation, or maybe even gaming.
A lottery ticket in a suit.
Basically.
Yeah.
So when a retail investor, someone with, pretty limited financial literacy, buys into that product, they're working under a completely false premise. They assume there's regulatory oversight, that someone did due diligence, like there would be for a normal stock or bond.
They assume they're on a level playing field.
Exactly, but they're not. If the product is actually closer to a casino game, the information gap, the asymmetry, is enormous. The insiders, the promoters, they know the real rules of the game. The public just thinks it's a new kind of investment.
And the result is what?
The result is systemic. The rich get richer, not because they're necessarily smarter, but because they are operating with legal clarity in an arena that everyone else just sees as a confusing mess.
That's a huge challenge to the idea of a fair market, and it connects directly to the second outcome you mentioned, right? That innovation suffers.
It does, because if all this public capital is being siphoned off into these questionable products, What is it not funding?
What's being starved of that capital?
The things that actually benefit society. If capital is flowing into some, highly marketed crypto token that promises a quick flip, instead of going through traditional venture capital or a legitimate IPO, well then real fundamental innovation gets left behind.
Can you give me a concrete example of what misses out?
For sure. Think of a clean energy company. They need $50 million to scale up production. Or a biotech startup working on cancer research that needs a huge capital infusion for its next trial phase.
They need real investment.
They rely on genuine investment capital from sources that do months of due diligence and expect returns based on, actual productivity, a real product.
And their competitors for that capital are promising 10 times returns overnight based on pure hype.
That's the diversion mechanism right there. The speculative assets, they just win the marketing war. They offer a bigger, faster story, a narrative return, even if the actual risk-adjusted return is terrible.
We see this with prediction markets, too. They're always talked up as this big innovation.
But Lexicon Labs points out they're ancient. I mean, they've existed for millennia. It's just a conditional contract.
So what's the issue today?
The issue is that they often represent products that are actually prohibited. Things like certain sports event contracts or binary bets, they should fall squarely under, unlicensed gambling or regulated futures laws.
So if the law says these things shouldn't exist, how do they?
They exist because of legal maneuvering. It's powered by this deep ambiguity in language, and it's all disguised as innovation. Instead of competing by creating a better technology, companies are pouring their energy into finding legal loopholes to launch products that just skirt the rules. That's not innovation. That's regulatory arbitrage.
So if that's what's happening to public capital and to real innovation, let's talk about competition itself. That's outcome number 3, right? Competition suffers.
It suffers badly.
I mean, fair competition is healthy. It's what gives us better options, lower prices. But this ambiguity around the 4 words, investing, speculation, gambling, gaming, it seems like it allows for competition that isn't just tough, it's fundamentally dishonest.
That's precisely it. Think about a diligent, regulated asset manager. They spend months, doing exhaustive research to find a security based on fundamentals that might give you a responsible return of 10%.
Over a year.
Right, over a whole year. And this person, who is operating strictly by the book, is suddenly competing for the same investor dollar with a crypto promoter saying a token can jump 10% tonight. Based on what? A tweet.
It's not a competition between products. It's diligence versus drama.
Exactly. And you see it so clearly in the gaming world, too. A lawful, tribal gaming operator running a tightly regulated casino is now competing for the exact same consumer dollar, the gambling dollar, with daily fantasy sports, sports betting apps, and these thinly veiled sports event contracts.
Many of which, Lexicon Lab suggests, shouldn't even exist in their current form.
Because they violate that foundational separation between what's considered regulated betting and what's a financial product.
So the regulated honest business, the one paying taxes, following consumer protection laws, is forced to compete against players who are using a totally different, much looser rulebook, all thanks to some linguistic games.
And for that honest business, the outcome is a massive drain. They either have to pour money into these long, expensive legal fights to try and enforce fairness,
or they give up.
They decide they can't beat the hype, so they join the fray. They start mimicking the behavior of the speculative actors. And that just drives this race to the bottom where the whole market becomes less safe and less productive.
Unfair competition leads to no real competition.
And everybody loses, which spirals us right into the 4th, and you could argue the most destructive outcome. Democracy suffers.
How so?
When the rules become so ambiguous that enforcement just breaks down, it corrodes the entire foundation of the rule of law. The core issue isn't that we don't have laws. It's the non-enforcement of the laws we've had for decades.
Why aren't they being enforced? Is it just too complex?
It's a mix of things, but the complexity is often created on purpose. When those 4 core terms, investing, speculation, gambling, gaming, are left blurry, regulators face this huge legal hurdle. Every time they try to enforce a rule, the company challenges the very definition of the thing being regulated.
So it turns into years of litigation.
Draining their resources, creating total uncertainty, and we're hearing this concern from inside the regulatory agencies themselves.
Right, there was that quote from SEC Commissioner Crenshaw.
Yes, she was very pointed about this. She said that ignoring courts and failing to faithfully and even handedly enforce even laws that have been on the books for decades is a serious crisis. And she laid out the consequences.
Which are?
First, she says it just corrodes the reputation of regulators in court. It makes them less effective, even in clear-cut fraud cases. Second, it undermines their credibility across the board, not just in crypto, but in every case they bring.
And the third one was the most serious, I thought.
It is. It's that it casts doubt on long-standing and fundamental case law.
That's the entire bedrock of finance. If the legal precedent that defines what a security is gets questioned over and over because of some new asset class, then the whole framework just starts to crumble. You get confusion, disarray.
Exactly. You get the opposite of clarity. When regulators fail to enforce the existing clear boundaries, they signal to the market that boundaries are optional. That's a systemic failure. It's a failure of the rule of law itself.
So to pull this all together, Lexicon Labs' approach, their whole philosophy, is built on this idea that words make worlds.
That's right. Their goal isn't to give legal advice or, tell people what to do. It's to provide the frameworks, the structural language, to bring some precision and transparency back to all of this, to cut through the fog.
So they're not really arguing that we need a bunch of brand new laws for every new technology.
No, they're arguing that we need to go back to first principles. We need to apply clear, precise definitions to those four fundamental terms. And when you look back at the four consequences we just talked about,
The welfare transfer, starving innovation, destroying fair competition, and corroding the rule of law.
the evidence is pretty undeniable. The cost of this linguistic ambiguity is measured in trillions of dollars. And it impacts everything from cancer research to your retirement savings.
This deep dive really is for anyone who's engaged with these dynamics, policymakers, finance professionals, scholars, or frankly anyone who's just curious about what's going on.
We've laid out how the financial fate of these multi-trillion-dollar industries really does rest on clarifying investing, speculation, gambling, and gaming.
So we want to leave you with a final thought on this, a provocation. If that level of definitional ambiguity is causing such systemic chaos in the global economy, what specific assumption in your own financial life or just an area you're curious about is currently being obscured by fuzzy definitions?
What are you calling an investment that, if you really look at the risk and the mechanism for return, might actually be speculation?
The power of linguistic precision, it really begins with the clarity you bring to your own decisions.